Well, basically, the local leagues here in the Caribbean, I think one of the big issues is definitely finance. I mean, I think, um, ironically, there is quite a lot of money in the Caribbean, but because of mismanagement in the past, I think a lot of businesses, stakeholders, they don't want to invest in not necessarily sports, but football, because there has been a lot of wrongdoing, So it's definitely a problem. So much so that they're considering opening a Caribbean league, not just each individual league. Will it work out? I'm not so sure because it'll mean a lot of travel. But even funding for the players, for example, the salaries are quite low in terms of obviously other countries. So much so that there's a lot of Trinidadians that actually play in India. Quite a few of my old teammates from Central FC play in India, and several other ones I know have played out there as well. So they tend to go to other leagues than play locally because, for example, an average salary here in the local league would be around, it's about 5,000 TT dollars minimum. So I think that would, I'm trying to work out the math now, it's usually six TT dollars to one US. So it's quite a low salary, so generally players may have to work as well. So it does obviously hamper the league. But the funny thing is there's a huge amount of talent compared, even though there's a low salary, So it's something that we probably do have to look at down the line.
The VAR Show. The one place for your weekly football update.
Hola, very warm welcome to the VAR show, the show which talks about all the various major football leagues in detail. Today we are going to conduct interviews and we have former West Indies international Mr. James Baird with us. So James has played for a mammoth 21 different clubs in the likes of Scotland, Faroe Islands, England, Trinidad and Tobago, US and Iceland. So we are not including the national teams because he has played for 3 different national teams. So without wasting much time, I would like to first thank James for coming on the show. Thank you and welcome to the show. And I would like to begin by asking you, how are you and what are you doing these days?
First of all, thank you very much for having me on the show. It's my distinct pleasure. I've always prided myself on really enjoying Indian football. It's one place that I always wanted to actually come and play. I never got the chance, but so it's a real pleasure to be here. In terms of the family-wise, we're all okay. I mean, it's a hard time for everybody during this pandemic, but I think as long as we keep to the guidelines, the governments are telling us, I think we should be okay, but it is a really trying time.
Of course, like in the introduction, I gave a slight hint, like there's so many places you have played in so many different clubs, and you have played in quite a lot of clubs around the world. How do you look back at your career? Like so much different culture all over the world. How do you look back?
Well, one of the things I remember first of all is I had a good bit of talent, but I was not the tallest as being a goalkeeper. So I had a little issue there, but I decided not to make it an issue. And for me, it was more important the experience rather than making millions and millions of dollars. Now, granted, we all need money to survive, but I wanted to experience the game in as many places and countries and cultures as I could. So that was why I kind of became like a journeyman, as they say in football. So, but looking back, I would never change it for 1 minute of that career because I got to meet some fantastic coaches, some fascinating players, supporters, and got to touch parts of the globe that I never thought I'd ever even reach. So for me, it's a very successful career. As I say, some players would say, well, a successful career is making hundreds of millions of dollars, but for me, it's more about touching people, helping people, and helping improve myself as a person as well as a footballer.
Of course, like you said that you are more of a journeyman and you traveled across. Like as a player who has traveled so much and played in so many different teams, how difficult or easy, according to your personal opinion, was it for you to settle in a team when you moved just into a team?
Well, I think when I was younger, it was very difficult because I remember when I think I was around 17 was the first time I went to the Faroe Islands, for example, and I was only there for about maybe just over a month. And as they say back home, I couldn't hack it. I couldn't cope with the the change of culture at that age. But then when I got a little older, maybe into my 20s, I found it a lot easier, you know. But I think it came down to being able to adapt and also how you deal with people. I think when I was a little younger, maybe in my 17s, I probably wasn't as confident around people. So being in a strange place on your own, you had to kind of learn that, you know. So I think it did take a few years, but I think football is one thing that it changes you as a person, because I was a very shy wee boy from Scotland, and football took me out of my shell. It made me learn things off the field that helped me as a person too. So I think a combination of the two. And as I say, with age came, I suppose, a level of maturity.
Of course, since you have played for so many clubs, if I had to ask you, it might be difficult, but if I had to ask you, like, where did you enjoy your time the most? Which would that be?
It's funny because people think that, you know, the club you'd enjoy the most, the bigger clubs, you know, because obviously they have more support. But thinking back, I mean, I'll single out two. My time at MB 1905, which is Nagoya, Bofalag in Faroe Islands, I really enjoyed because I went there. It was a time of my career when I had came from Trinidad and Tobago, went to Faroe Islands, and I didn't have too many expectations. And the town really embraced me, so much so that I think a lot of the supporters and friends that I made there said that it was quite a quiet town until I came. And I changed them, I gave them, you know, they enjoyed their football. I was player coach, I coached the youths and I played for the team, and we ended up getting promotion that year. And I was also head coach of the women's team who won the league as well. So it was a very successful year. I made a lot of friends that I still keep in contact, so lifelong friends. And I think because it was a smaller club, I got to know a lot of people in the town. So to me, that touched my heart, and so much so that every single year that goes by, there's always a chance that I may go back there and coach them, because I have such a fondness for the team and for the community. So that's one place. The other place would probably be coming to Trinidad and Tobago for the first time when I came to Tobago United. I was in England, I got the chance to come to Tobago, and it was a move that was probably treacherous in my career. It was maybe to some people a silly move to a Caribbean league that compared to the other leagues in the world was no level. But when I got here, it was a big eye-opener. I mean, I think the culture's very different, the climate's very different, and it took me a little while to settle in, but when I did, it opened up a lot of doors for me, and probably was the best year of my life. I mean, I got to meet people. I mean, I met my wife in Tobago. So a whole bunch of things for me, and I think that steered my life to where it is now, you know.
Of course, and I wanted to ask you, you didn't even not only played for many clubs, you played for many countries also, like at different various age level. How did that happen?
Well, I think obviously after Scotland, the funny thing is, when I came to the Caribbean, one of the things I've always attracted a lot of people from different countries to kind of, whether it is they were interested in my career or just, I don't like to use the term supporters because that brings a level of egotism, but people that looked out for your career. So when I came to the Caribbean or before, quite a few Caribbean countries had been in touch, and there's a lot of Caribbean countries that they use the British passport. So it opened up doors. So for example, I went to British Virgin Islands, I trained with the team, played some games with the under-23s. I did not end up playing for the senior team because of a lot of bureaucracy and red tape, let's just say. The coach wanted me to play, didn't work out, because a lot of these islands have rules that you need a British passport, but then they could use British players, but they decide that they want people to live there for X amount of years first. So because of my career, I couldn't necessarily commit to 5 years there, so I did not play with the senior team. But then again, for example, the West Indies team, I was approached through the NF board, which is a non-FIFA organisation, and they wanted a representative from the Caribbean. So that opened up that one too. So that then gave another national opportunity. And then again, I've also helped, for example, Turks and Caicos. I'm very much in contact with Anguilla. So I think because of the contacts I have a huge broad spectrum of roles and that I do, and it's helped me in my career. And I think connections and communication with people is very important, especially in life now.
Of course, and you spoke about West Indies Day where you did go on to make, I think, a few appearances for the national team. And I happened to, when I was preparing the questions, I wanted to see, about West Indies footballing culture what it is. So I opened like everyone else Wikipedia, and you won't believe me, the president, the head coach, and of course the team had your name. Like you are the president of the board, the head coach of the team, and also the goalkeeper. How is football in West Indies?
Well, as I say, West Indies obviously is basically Caribbean minus a few of the countries, but I think football in the Caribbean in general is very underestimated. There's a lot of top players, and you're now seeing it, for example, with the CONCACAF region, where like the guy that's playing for Bayern Munich, I can't remember his name now, is it Alphonso Davies? Yeah. So he's obviously from this region, and there's a lot of talent. Even when Rangers played a few weeks ago against Bayern Leverkusen, there's a guy from Jamaica. So the West Indies has a lot of players, and by extension, obviously the Caribbean. So it's such a broad pool. Now, as I say, the West Indies opportunity came about because they wanted a representative. They gave me that mantra to go and do it. And at the time, because I was aged, I put myself down as a player as well, as coach. And I think it was a very unique role. And to be honest, the West Indies team is still going about. But what we focused on over the last few years is coaching kids. So we've been coaching a lot of kids. We had an academy very active last year. And it was growing, doing very well. But obviously COVID has came in and disrupted that. And I'm not sure what will happen with I'm not sure what will happen with football long term, but with also a lot of these projects, because obviously finances come into it. If we can get back on the field face to face, so there's a lot of things that will we're really in limbo at the moment to see what will happen. But it's a great project, and I think I was very privileged to be given that honour of taking it on.
So, of course, are you still associated with the West Indies football or the FA in any way?
Yes, I am. As I say, it's still very much up and running, and I will always have it, because basically when I was given that opportunity, I was given the reins, and it's kind of like my baby. So it will always run, and even if I go to other countries, I will probably put somebody maybe in temporary charge or while I'm not here, because my home is in Trinidad and Tobago, but obviously my career is very important too. So for example, I'm contracted to a Canadian team at the moment, so hopefully when COVID eventually allows travel, I will go up there as well. So it's very much a long-term project, but like everything, funding does come into it. There's a lot more things we can do if I had a big checkbook, but that's life, So.
Of course, and that's the next question I wanted to ask. How is the finances in regards to maybe football in West Indies? How is the league? What is the structure? What is everything because you're involved? I'm asking you this.
Well, basically, the local leagues here in the Caribbean, I think one of the big issues is definitely finance. I mean, I think, ironically, there is quite a lot of money in the Caribbean, but because of mismanagement in the past, I think a lot of businesses, stakeholders, they don't want to invest in not necessarily sports, but football, because there has been a lot of wrongdoing, So it's definitely a problem. So much so that they're considering opening a Caribbean league, not just each individual league. Will it work out? I'm not so sure, because it'll be a lot of travel. But even funding for the players, for example, the salaries are quite low in terms of obviously other countries. So much so that there's a lot of Trinidadians that actually play in India. Quite a few of my old teammates from Central FC play in India, and several other ones I know have played out there as well. So they tend to go to other leagues than play locally, because, for example, an average salary here in the local league would be around, it's about 5,000 TT dollars minimum. So I think that would, I'm trying to work out the math now, it's usually six TT dollars to $1 US. So it's quite a low salary, So generally players may have to work as well. So it does obviously hamper the league. But the funny thing is, there's a huge amount of talent compared, even though there's a low salary, So it's something that we probably do have to look at down the line.
So I just wanted to ask you one more thing. You generally spoke in a broader aspect in terms of Caribbean. So whatever you said, the salary and the league, is it all over the Caribbean, or is it only for West Indies?
Well, I would say, as I say, the Caribbean and West Indies are basically the same. So they basically fall into, for example, you have the Jamaican Premier League, Trinidad and Tobago, you'll have Dominican Republic. There's about 5 countries that have big leagues, or what I would say is professional leagues. And then you have some of the smaller countries that have, they may class them as semi-pros. So there's quite a few leagues like Anguilla, Turks and Caicos, British Virgin Islands who have probably amateur leagues, so they won't get anything. But the bigger leagues like Trinidad, Jamaica, Dominican Republic, they would pay their players. So it is a huge broad spectrum of the countries and who can pay, but generally those top 4 countries would pay. The other ones may be very much amateur or semi-professional. So it does go country to country, and the sad reality of that is it means a lot of players can't focus full time on football, which means obviously they have to work too, so that segregates their time, which makes it very difficult. So it's something that I hope over time the region catches up, because as I say, there's a lot of talent. I think in general it will help Caribbean countries or West Indies countries, make it to World Cups, and these kind of things in the future.
Of course, and like I think you mentioned, like you're currently with Montreal Maniac. So what do you do there? Like, what is your position there? What is your role?
Well, my role is technical director of the senior program, which is actually a very new program. So basically, Montreal Manic was born from Montreal Rangers, and Montreal Manic was one of the most famous indoor teams and NASL teams back in the 70s kind of thing. So basically, the club was rebranded and re-brought back out this year. So I was brought on to basically head up the senior program, which again, because of COVID, is hampering this, because I was in the process of doing a lot of looking around, recruitment, helping the ownership decide if we should have a senior team playing in which division, etc. Because the focus was always on the academy, which is very important and which is the main purpose of the club. So we want basically an outlet for those younger players to play before we can send them off to say Europe or North America. So it's a huge project, and the good thing is hopefully we'll have links to a lot of clubs around the world, and it will be a very, very mutually beneficial partnership for everybody involved. So it's going to be a great opportunity for players and for supporters, and it's brought back a name to the table that it's funny, because since it came on board, there's a lot of Canadian supporters from back in the day who really love the club, so they've got a little bit of fire in their belly again, excited to see what happens. But again, it all comes down to what will happen next in terms of this pandemic. So a great project. I'm having to do it remotely at the moment. Difficult, but very happy to be on board.
Of course, and you said, in your earlier days, you used to coach along with playing maybe the youth side. You used to coach the youth side, and you also coached few teams earlier. And now you're more involved in the technical director. Do you plan, or do you have any plans to get back into coaching as such?
Well, as I say, the technical director roles that I generally in the countries that I've been in, are the head coach as well. So I think, and this is the one thing I think that football needs a worldwide vocabulary, because country to country it's different. So for example, in Europe they tend to call it maybe a sporting director or a technical, and then in the UK they may call it director of football. Some places call it head coach. So generally, my roles have been head coach and technical director combined. So I am very, very much involved in the coaching. So it's not so much behind the scenes; it's more on the field, but with a broader view of the philosophy of the club and all those things. So, and to be honest, I have big ambitions. I want to coach some of the big leagues, and but I am very much wanting all my projects to bear fruit, So it's an interesting question, because I think it's something that a lot of people not misinterpret, but because each country, for example, like Montreal is generally French as well, and there's a lot of translations that don't translate properly, and it makes it very difficult for people to understand, what this means. So, but it does change country to country. So I am very much still heavily involved in the coaching side, yes.
Of course, but generally, like you said, the terminology of technical director varies from maybe country to country and even club to club. Is the ones which you have been involved in, as you said, it also involves being the head coach. Is it something that you look out for, that I want to be the head coach also, or is it something that comes with the job automatically?
Well, it's personally something that I mean, for example, I've always pushed to, whenever I get offered, generally I would get offered a job as a head coach. And then when with negotiations, I think basically the head coach generally is the pinnacle team or the marquee team for any club. So I think personally the young players have to aspire to want to be on that team. So whereas when I've been offered roles, I've always suggested that I think it should be technical director, because I think that the senior club or the senior position should mould the rest of the club. So, for example, the under 10s player should play the same formation, the same way that the senior team's playing, so that they can gradually step up. And I think that's very important to a lot of clubs. But again, as I say, in different countries they call it different roles. But for me, there has to be a progression from the youth to the youth, up the youth ladder and then into the senior program. Because if you don't do that, it means that the players will never be able to get a chance in the senior team. You know. So I think it's something that's just my philosophy. Every coach and every football person has their own philosophy. That's mine. I think there has to be a ladder up the way. If not, you're going to have to keep buying players, you know. And I think the way football's going, the money is so huge that not all teams can afford that. So I think you have to provide a progressive player plan, you know.
Of course, and like you mentioned a term that there is philosophy, and your philosophy is to maybe get along with the youth. But as a coach, what is your footballing philosophy like? How do you like your team to play?
Well, generally, because I was a goalkeeper, I liked it. I mean, first of all, I have to have a very solid back line. You know, I like my defensive players to be comfortable on the ball, but to be smart. That, you know, we're not playing around with it too much. I don't mind them playing it out from the back, but we have to be, you know, cautious to, you know, not cause goals against. But generally, my teams are a high pressing place. I usually play a 4-2-3-1 with my three attacking midfielders really pressing the opposition so that we make them make mistakes and then we punish them. So I always say that it's kind of like I like my teams to have a killer instinct and a lot of pace with a solid backline, and that's how I mean, for example, I coached the Trinidadian team last year, and it was a Division 1 team. It was not a Premier team, and we pushed a lot of the Premier teams because they couldn't handle the physical side of the game, the workload and the pace that we put, and it really caused a lot of problems, and it made me reevaluate my philosophy, I think, a lot as well. But what I would say with that is it comes with whatever country you're in. Each country has different styles of players, different attributes, so you have to look at the team, the country, and then adapt your philosophy around that team.
Of course, and like you said, like you have a clear philosophy that you would want ideally your team to play. Of course, you'll have to adapt according to the talent or various aspects that you have in the new team. But like you said, you like a team to press high. How do you incorporate that idea into a new team, or how do you know how much or how long do you take to understand like, oh, these people aren't up to the standard, and or they cannot do what I want and I have to adjust?
We'll put it that way. When I took over my team last year, I would say it generally takes a team at least 6 weeks to learn a new style of play, you know. And it took a little bit of time. There's a little teething because players learn to play a certain way, and they sometimes don't want to change. And it meant sometimes you have to bring in other players or change players' positions, you know, and find who's the best fit. But personally, I mean, for example, for the club that I was with last year, I found that because we were coming up against teams that were probably better than us, we had to use our strengths, which was our pace, our endurance to push teams back. And in fact, we had some really good finishers of the ball, so they were able to score goals for us. So I think it's something that you have to spend some time, as I say, minimum 6 to 8 weeks to work on a new style of play. And but you have to keep doing it, repetition over and over again, making sure each player individually knows their role in the team. And also, even over and above that, as a coach, you have to make sure you have, I don't like to use the term substitutes, backup players, because like in every team there's injuries. Everybody has to know, even the substitutes, that when they come in, this is what they do, you know? And it means you're taking a little bit more time. And generally a pre-season is a good time to do that. But my team's always had a general fitness level. So you have to incorporate the fitness with the learning of the style. And if you do that, and if it works out well, obviously you'll have a successful season. But it all comes down to the planning, and that's where the realization and all these different things in football come into it massively.
Okay, I have another question. Okay, and it might be very stupid question. It's just like with the limited knowledge that I have, I'm asking you
No
this
problem.
question. As an outsider, I have never seen a goalkeeper be a top coach in a top team. They always be maybe a goalkeeper coach, or they hold some other positions in the club. Why is it? Why is that so? Because is it because as a keeper you see the game differently, or you have experienced the game differently to maybe the midfielders who have more, or the defenders or the forwards who have more command over the full game? Is it something like that?
Well, I think it's a strange thought because generally, if you think about it, the goalkeeper's at the back and he sees everything. So if you take that into consideration, a goalkeeper should be an excellent coach because he's had years upon years of watching the game from a certain view. But I think in the past, goalkeeping is quite a physical game, as you know. I mean, there's a lot of knocks, and I think a lot of goalkeepers, by the time their career comes to finish, they're not really their focus is more on I could go train some goalkeepers, or maybe they don't want to stay in the game. So there's not been a huge amount of goalkeepers stayed in the game. Like Walter Zenga, for example, the Italian goalkeeper, and he went in and he had an okay career. But generally, you're right. There's not been a huge amount of goalkeepers, especially become top coaches. But I think the game's changed, and for me, I was always a student of the game. I mean, I love football in the broad sense, not just. I mean, yes, I love being a goalkeeper, but I took every opportunity to learn. So I think what I bring to the table is I do see it from that position, but I can also see it from other positions too. So it's a very unique question, and I think I would be curious to go look at now the internet and see how many coaches there is, because I can't think of many off the top of my head. But I think it's something that, as I say, the game's changing, it's evolving all the time, and you probably will see a lot of coaches, and you may even be surprised some of the coaches that you didn't know maybe were goalkeepers. Because even another fun fact with me is I played games as an outfield player as well. Even when I was in Iceland in 2017, I ended up playing, I think, 2-3 games as an outfield player. So generally, goalkeepers now tend to be, I wouldn't say as good as, but we're footballers. We have to be able to play. So we have to have those abilities too. So it's a very interesting question, and I hope to see a lot more goalkeepers go into it. But the simple answer is I can only speak for myself. And I know I love the game, and I love coaching, and I love helping, and I have a clear philosophy. Maybe other goalkeepers don't.
I have a reasoning. Maybe that can be one of the things. You can correct me, or you can just add your input to it. We generally hear or see that goalkeepers train as a unit, and they train maybe kind of separately from the main team. So is it because of that, like you're not involved maybe with a huge amount of people on a day-to-day basis? Maybe is that what plays into your mind?
It could come into it because we have a term that we call it. We have the goalkeepers union, so the goalkeepers look out for each other, and I think the reason that comes in is it's a mental side of the game, because being a goalkeeper is very much a mental game, because you can go for 88 minutes of a game, 91 minutes of a game, and then have one save in extra time. So it's very much about concentration. So I think there's an offside of the game, but then if you think about it this way, that concentration is the very same concentration a coach would need. So it's maybe that they just don't want to go into after the game or not. But you're right, there is a segregation between players and goalkeepers, because even when you're on the training field, sometimes the goalkeepers would get a lot of stick or a lot of quarrelling between the outfield players because they feel they could do better, and vice versa. So it's a good observation. I just think the other thing you have to think about too is there's only one coach. Now, outfield players, there's 10 of, where there's one goalkeeper. So maybe it's just there's not enough teams for opportunities to come about, and maybe that's why a lot of goalkeepers go into goalkeeping coaching, because they could do that, and they're the only one that can do that. Whereas if they're up against 11 or 10 other players, the chances of getting a head coaching role may be small. So there's a lot of the philosophy comes into it, or a lot of But again, the simple idea or simple answer is I am not sure. As I say, I can speak for myself, but I would like to see a lot more get into it. I mean, but generally, even if you look at Peter Cech, for example, I think he went into more like the sporting director or the behind-the-scene role at Chelsea. Even one of my good friends, Lutz Pfannenstiel, who was another globe-trotting goalkeeper, he has now became basically the sporting director or the general manager of St. Louis City in America. So it's funny, something I've not thought about, but now you bring it to my attention. I see that maybe they branch out into other roles. So maybe I never got that memo, but I am very comfortable coaching, so I will stick to my route at the moment.
Of course, like I have another follow-up, maybe kind of follow-up to that, and it's like like I said that like since goalkeepers train separately and maybe they are not involved, so they do not become the coach. So maybe the others train together, and maybe since they at least have experienced the other positions at least once in their lifetime, maybe during the game, maybe something, they can handle that, and they have a different goalkeeper coach. Like all teams have a goalkeeper coach separate, which the coach does not maybe handle. So maybe that can be a thing, like you said, like you can separate one department to the other specialist and handle the other part. That's, I think that's easier. So in your case, do you have a goalkeeper coach, because you have been a goalkeeper in your career? So do you keep a goalkeeper coach?
Yes, I do. I mean, I think, and as you said that, it made me think of something. If you think of every coaching staff, generally, although there's a head coach and an assistant coach, there would be other coaches too. And if you actually look at most staff, they would have a defensive coach, they would have a goalkeeping coach, an attacking coach. They may not label them as that. And generally, those players have been, for example, a famous striker or somebody that did well. So they do have other roles that, if you think about it, are very similar to like a goalkeeping coach role, but we just don't label them as an attacking coach. We just call them a coach. So maybe that is one aspect to look at. But I do use a goalkeeping coach, but I'm very selective who I pick because of being heavily involved in goalkeeping. I know the tricks of the trade, and I know. So I would keep a heavy eye over the goalkeepers to make sure, I know the ways that as a goalkeeper you can not cheat training, but you can get away with things that So I want to make sure my goalkeepers are putting in as much as I did or as much as the team are. But very much you need all those coaches, and especially as a head coach or a technical director, you need to give your coaches a level of maturity that they can work on their own, and you've got to give them that credit as well. So there's a lot of great coaches out there, and even here in the Caribbean as well.
Of course, and like another question, like maybe when you are a player, maybe you did not understand this much, like the decision of the coach, that if you did not play, you would of course feel maybe bad, or you would want to play every week as a goalkeeper. But there's only one position you can play as a goalkeeper. Like maybe you can have three best goalkeepers of the world, but only one person can play at a time. So as a coach, suppose you have two very good goalkeepers, and maybe probably only one gets to play. How do you develop the other person? Because without playing, the other person is not going to develop. How do you
Well,
develop?
this is true, because this is something in my early part of my career. I was at a lot of clubs, and I didn't play a lot at some clubs. Some clubs I played a lot. So it's a difficult thing, and a goalkeeper is very much a role about confidence. And the more you play, the more you get confidence. So I think as a coach, what I learned from the coaches I worked under, this is where, for example, like loan moves or playing for the reserve teams. Now, it's not, as a player, you don't want to play for the reserves. You obviously want to play for the first team, but you have to get minutes under your belt, because you have to be fresh, because there's only one goalkeeper, and if that goalkeeper gets injured and you're the backup player, you have to be ready to step in and take the position. Even although we're friends off the field, you have to want that role. So as a goalkeeper or as a coach, so you have to make sure your backup goalkeepers are very much fit, but match fit as well. And this is where, as I say, you'll see a lot of clubs loan out maybe not their second choice goalkeeper, their third choice goalkeeper, to make sure he's fit. And sometimes then he becomes fitter than the second choice. So it's a lot of balancing and moving around the players and making sure they get game time. And this is where partnerships with clubs come in massively. So, for example, if I was coaching a team here in Trinidad and I had three goalkeepers, maybe I'd send my third goalkeeper to the Super League to play, so he's getting game time. But again, it all comes down to the unique partnerships you have, because other coaches may not want to play your goalkeeper because they have a goalkeeper. So it's a very difficult thing to balance. And you see, for example, in the Premier League, they sometimes give their backup goalkeeper the cup games. But again, it comes down to the coach's philosophy. If you want to win everything, you generally want your best players playing. So it's a very fine balancing act. But I think there is ways around it with loan moves and even arranging extra friendly matches to make sure their game time is optimum.
Of course, and I wanted to get to a more lighter topic. And since you have been across the world, a lot of different countries, different cultures, what is the most bizarre experience that you ever had?
Wow. I've had a lot of bizarre experiences, and some of them ironically happened in Scotland, and some of them I can't talk on camera because, not that they may embarrass people and things like that, but I think, wow, I'm trying to, I'll give an example. I went to play in Germany with some of the world celebrities, actually, with Global United, and it's very funny to meet players, and you see them on TV, and you have this stigma of how a player is, and you meet them and you're blown away. They're the complete opposite. So, for example, I grew up as a Rangers fan in Scotland. We have a huge rivalry with Celtic. So when I went to play with this world all-star team, one of the players was Pierre Van Hooijdonk, who is now a very, very good friend of mine. And so we had this little bit of a rivalry, but I always thought when I saw him on TV, he was arrogant and all these things. And when you meet them, it's not the case, and you realise they're just a man like me, kind of thing. So I think so we spent a lot of time with a group of us, and they ended up saying that I am the craziest person they've ever met, which I find bizarre because I don't find I'm that crazy. But when I went to Germany, all these guys, they're very cultured. They speak several languages. I generally only speak English, a little bits of the countries I've went to, Faroe Islands, Denmark, so I have little bits of words. So when we were sitting in the hotel, ordering our evening meal, it was in German. I don't speak German. So I'm looking through the menu and I'm trying to come up with something. And the only thing I could see on this menu was tiramisu. Only thing I could understand. So I ordered tiramisu. So then when the meals come and all the players are getting steak and chicken and everything, they bring me this dessert bowl with tiramisu and everybody just starts to laugh. So now I am known the world over by the nickname tiramisu because I couldn't understand any German, and I ended up going to bed with a dessert and not a main meal. There's a funny story that, it shows that you really should learn more languages because you never know where you might end up and you can't read a menu to order a meal. And then there's other instances where one of the funniest stories is when I was a young boy, my brother and I used to play football a lot. So I have a younger brother, he's 2 years younger. And my family had a farm up in Scotland. And we used to go out and play. And one of the times he kicked the ball a little further and it landed on what looked like a piece of concrete. So he said, "James, can you go get the ball?" I went to get the ball, ran, jumped onto what I thought was concrete, and it was actually cow manure. So it was cow feces, So I started to sink all the way up to my head. And my father had to run out of the house and pull me out of this cow feces, and everybody in the whole town laughing, And it's something that it's a terrible it was a terrible instance for me, but I always think back at how my brother said to me, "Yes, James, it's only concrete, okay," and I took his word for it and went and did it. But I have so many stories. As I say, there's a lot that I can't say on air. I was even in Scotland at one time when a player was very upset with the coach, and he let's just say he left a present on the coach's desk, and it was not a very nice thing. So there's a huge bunch of terrible things that happen. But football's a wonderful game. You get to meet some amazing people from different cultures, backgrounds. I even spent some time in Bosnia just after the war, and to hear the people's stories there, even though they had been through so much, football kind of brought them a little bit of joy, and that's the one thing I've stuck to. Football can bring people together from different religions, different races, different backgrounds, different levels of social, on the scale. So it's a wonderful game. And I think we've got to be very grateful. It's not just football; it's obviously sports. We've got to be grateful for this gift that we've been given, which obviously is football. Yeah.
Of course, and I'll move on from that. And like, if you had to choose one standout moment from your career, like as the maybe highlight of your career, which one would that be?
I think, like I mentioned, when I was in Faroe Islands, winning promotion with the team was a huge thing. But one thing that I always never give credit to is when I was playing with Central FC as player goalkeeper coach in 2016, we won the league, the CFU, which is the regional competition, which is basically like the Europa League of the Caribbean, and the cup. And but I didn't play much. I was more there as a coach because I fractured my ankle that year. And I don't give that season a lot of credit, but when I think back, it was a really amazing achievement because to win the regional competition against all the countries in the Caribbean, it's something to really think back on. And then even when I was a younger player and I was at Alloa, I was a 15-year-old and we ended up winning the league, I think 3 times while I was there. The second division, the third division, second division, first division, some of the local cups. So, I mean, there's been a lot that I have won as a player, and I think each moment gives you a little bit of joy, But I think for me, even just to be able to last 20 years as a professional gives me a lot of joy as well. Because, I mean, I was a good player. I wasn't a great player, but I had a lot of passion and a lot of work rate, and I wanted to do, a lot of times I could have quit, and I kept going. And I think it's made me into the person that I am today. So I think even just my career in general is probably one of my biggest achievements.
Of course, and like, so I'll ask you one final question, okay? And if you had to like give a piece of advice to a young player and also a coach coming up, what advice would you give a player and a coach, like separate people?
Well, the first thing I would say to a player is, I mean, you'll hear this from every coach, so I won't use this as my only piece of advice. Obviously, never give up is something that I think to any player is so important because there will be opportunities along the way that a coach may tell you, take you into his office and say, you're not good enough. But learn to question why, for example, you're not good enough. So, for example, in my instance, I was never really told I was not good enough. It was because I was not the tallest goalkeeper. But then in your mind, then you have to come up with a reason if that's what you want to do. If it's, I am not tall enough, how do I go over that, So we have to start questioning why you can't do something. And really don't let anybody tell you can't do something. And then keep working at it, keep working at it. And I think individual training and just enjoying what you're doing is so important as a player. Because at the end of the day, if you don't enjoy playing football, even if you keep doing it, you may keep doing it because your parents tell you to do it, or your friends, or maybe you're just good at it. But if you don't have that love, it will never be your best attribute, So keep working at it, never give up, and just put in a lot of effort. And you'll be surprised how far you get. And also, the last thing I would say to a player is, don't be scared to take opportunities, especially outside your comfort zone. I did it. I played all over the world. I mean, I could have quite easily stayed in Scotland and had a 20-year career playing pro or semi-pro. But to me, I would not have the stories. I would not have met my family. I would not have, met the people that I've met. I think for me, to take a risk sometimes. And as a coach, I would say, try and get as much knowledge as you can. I mean, you could say you go and do every course under the sun. And I mean, for example, the B license courses I've done, they teach you, I would say, more than the higher level courses, So you have to have your framework or your baseline there. But learn, read. I mean, I don't like to read, but you have to read. Learn different coaches' philosophies. Get to know people. And I think this is one thing as a coach. If you do not know people, you will never be successful, because you have to manage people. You have to be able to manage the coaches set the games, their objectives. So it's very important to have relationships and learn as much as possible. And I think my dog outside trying to get in an interview as well. I hear him barking, so he maybe agrees.
Definitely. So I'll not take much of your time, and I'll just finish it here. So on that note, thank you so much James, for coming and talking to me and sharing your experience. And I wish you all the best for whatever endeavors you're doing, especially with Montreal, and when you go back with whatever you are doing for Caribbean, like in various capacities. And I hope you all get whatever success you aim for. And thank you once again for coming. Take care, stay safe. Bye.
No, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And maybe one day you'll see me in India.
Hopefully.
Thank you.